Hey, everybody. Welcome to another Purple Insider Extra. Matthew Coller and Sam Ekstrom here. And Sam, since the last time we talked, the Minnesota Vikings talked to Jim Harbaugh. I want to get your reaction. Were you surprised that the Vikings are entertaining the idea of Jim Harbaugh as their head coach?
I think if you have the connection, you may as well exhaust it. You may as well take advantage of talking to a very successful head coach if you have an executive who is friendly with him. Now, I get the feeling that the 2013-14 overlap between Kwesi, Adolfo Mensa, and Jim Harbaugh might be a little overblown. I'm not sure Jim Harbaugh would have known the guy's name at that point. He was very, very low on the ladder in San Francisco. So who knows whether there was a real kinship formed, but he uses his contacts. He gets the interview. Great. Let's see if there's interest. To me, I think that Jim Harbaugh has a couple potential motives here. I think he might be angling for, more of a financial or commitment from Michigan or an extension. And he might also just be like testing the waters, dipping his toe in. I know that there's been talk about Harbaugh and Miami as well. And I think if he goes back to the NFL, he's going to want it to be a good situation. And I heard you talk about this on the podcast. He's not going to the best situation in Minnesota. I mean, you're talking about probably a little bit of a rebuild or at least a 1-year window where you need to take a step back. Is Jim Harbaugh ready for that? Does he want to sully his sterling NFL record? I'm not sure about that. And I'm not sure how that fit is when you're all this talk about collaboration and culture, and Jim Harbaugh tends to burn bridges wherever he goes. So I'm not sure if I love the fit, but it's hard to argue with the man's credentials. So I think there's a fair argument on the other side of it too.
Right. I think that trying to match it up with the Vikings timeline is difficult because if you say, well, bring him in and he'll improve this team and they'll win right away, then I would direct you to the cap situation and to the roster and ask, but how? I mean, because when you look at the defensive side of the ball, they have so many positions to overhaul. And even if he were to bring in a great defensive mind like Vic Fangio to work with the defense, as we've seen from Mike Zimmer, once upon a time, Zimmer was considered the defensive genius when the roster was great. But I don't think there's anybody who could just wave a magic wand and all of a sudden you go from one of the worst defenses in the league that needs to be totally overhauled, whether that's free agency, the draft. They just need a lot of players on the defensive side and then say, okay, you're good. You're going to be a Super Bowl contender now. And even though Harbaugh's teams were good in San Francisco, if you look at the years leading up to those seasons where he was great, they drafted extremely well. That is something we can't really say for the Vikings in recent years. The other thing is, too, if you bring in Jim Harbaugh, your team is the Harbaugh Vikings. They are not the Adolfo Mensa Vikings or whoever's playing quarterback or whatever. It is his franchise when that happens. And I was doing a little research about his time in San Francisco, and I know that their GM at the time, Trent Baalke, is the one who took a lot of, you could say, the bulk of the criticism there. But Harbaugh and Baalke got off to the right start. They were considered to be friends. And then Baalke had all of the roster power and Harbaugh became disenchanted with some of the moves that happened. And I think that that's very possible that you could end up with the same sort of situation. It's sort of playing with gasoline a little bit, but at the same time, like you said, this man has won a lot of football games in a lot of different places. So I don't doubt that he's a very good coach. I just don't know how good of a fit it is with the current situation for the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, I saw one of our friends, Scott Korzanowski, on Twitter liken it to Tom Thibodeau with the Timberwolves. Kind of a surly individual who wants to micromanage, have roster control, have a lot of power. And, maybe it's too simplistic of a comparison, but I think that there is some validity to that if you bring in Harbaugh, you're buying into whatever his philosophies are. And that's going to apply to on the field. That's going to apply to roster building, when I think that a lot of fans had hope for sort of a newer, more modern, fresher look, some fresher names. I think there's an appeal to sort of the unknown, and that's, comes with Kevin O'Connell, D'Amico Ryans. People are excited about either of those individuals. And with Harbaugh, you do know that you're getting a winning football coach, but at what cost? And will it work here with the Vikings? The NFL's different too, a decade later than when Harbaugh got hired for the 49ers. So He flamed out the first time in the NFL after a successful few years, and then his players seemed to kind of turn on him. Maybe it's a cautionary tale. Maybe he learned some lessons. Maybe his time in Michigan has, taught him more about like what he wants to do when he goes back to the NFL. But yeah, it's a curious and fascinating possibility if it comes to fruition. Sounds like the Vikings are going to LA, though, to interview some of the other candidates after the Rams beat the 49ers. So it's not like they are tunnel vision on Jim Harbaugh here.
Right. And the most recent reporting of this recording from Adam Schefter has said that it doesn't seem like there's a high chance the Vikings go with Jim Harbaugh, but certainly the most intriguing candidate that would be the most exciting thing to happen to Vikings fans in quite some time, I think, if Jim Harbaugh were to take over. But maybe the better route is to hire either the offensive or defensive coordinator of the team going to the Super Bowl. And they are also supposed to talk to Raheem Morris again out in Los Angeles, along with Kevin O'Connell and D'Amico Ryans as well, who did a great job in the NFC Championship against the Los Angeles Rams offense. And if his safety catches a long pass that was right into his hands, maybe we're talking about the 49ers in the Super Bowl. You know what I think, Sam? This is maybe the least hot take you could ever come up with, but I think all three of them have the credentials to be the next head coach of the Vikings and could really fit. I mean, all three of these guys, I think, better fit with the timeline. All three of them, you would be happy with bringing in, pairing them with a younger quarterback if that's the direction the Vikings want to go, and building up from there. I mean, Kevin O'Connell, he's basically doing the same thing that, the head coach, Zach Taylor of the Cincinnati Bengals did, which was be the right-hand man to Sean McVay. But also, D'Amico Ryans has been a quick riser in the NFL, and people are looking for sort of the next Mike Tomlin that we've heard reported. Well, D'Amico Ryans is kind of that, only with a player background. And Raheem Morris has a background on both sides of the ball. So I think for all three of those candidates, you can make a really good case that they would be a good choice for the Vikings' next head coach.
Yeah, and the rumors are that those are the finalists. And I think if that's the case, the Vikings have probably made the right moves there. Of the people that were left, they lose Hackett, for instance, to the Broncos, and Kellen Moore is no longer an option. And like, it seems like they kind of found the right fits. Kevin O'Connell's the most intriguing to me because he's on the offensive side of the ball. We saw what happened with Zach Taylor. Where now I think McVay deserves, plenty of props for now getting to the Super Bowl with a second quarterback 2 times in 5 seasons. I think that there's plenty to learn, not just from LA, but, being in the same division as San Francisco, you learn a lot about what they're doing offensively. You see what Arizona's doing offensively. And I like the climate that Kevin O'Connell would be coming from, where he's surrounded by and he goes against a lot of great offensive minds. I think Raheem Morris is probably my favorite of the defensive-minded candidates just because of his background a little bit on both sides of the ball. He does have head coaching experience and seemed to really get the Falcons to play for him hard last year as an interim. So I would vote for Raheem Morris. He has the endorsement of his players in LA, and I think that would be a good fit.
And Raheem Morris's defense came up big in the biggest times against the San Francisco 49ers. A huge third down stop, a huge stop at the end. It does help to have Aaron Donald, of course, but Raheem Morris also did a good job as the interim head coach of the Atlanta Falcons before, and has experience working with the Shanahan passing system. And I think what we saw in the NFC Championship is that both of the coaches really know how to scheme up to help their quarterbacks. And I think that's the most important. That wouldn't make me out on D'Amico Ryans because his connections and roots, even going back to playing for Gary Kubiak, are in that similar Shanahan style offense. And I think the Vikings are right to target their candidates in either a McVay or Shanahan style offense, which are very similar, have a lot of the same ideas. And I think they're going in the right direction by picking those guys and taking a little more of a slow approach, one of those guys, and building up your roster from there to the point where then you can make the big free agent moves or trades that the Los Angeles Rams did. Both of the teams that are in the Super Bowl, they got to the point where they believed, all right, now it's time to flip the win now switch And here they are playing for a championship. So the Vikings will want to follow that, whether that's trying to rebuild quickly or a little more of a slow approach. I think that any of those candidates probably are good. I know that's not, the fire take exactly, but I think it's the truth. So Sam, thanks for your time as always. And to listen to more discussion of us talking about coaching candidates and the latest with the Vikings and the Super Bowl as well, check out the Purple Insider podcast and sign up for the newsletter purpleinsider.substack.com. And we'll catch you next time.